My fiancée thought I wanted less time with her because I loved her less. That was not true. I wanted less pressure because I was already fighting to hold myself together. I'm 26. My fiancée, Mara, is 27. We have known each other since we were teenagers. We dated when we were 16, broke up before university because neither of us wanted to do long distance, and then somehow found our way back to each other years later. For a while, it felt like one of those rare second chances people talk about, the kind where you think maybe the timing was finally right. When we reconnected, everything felt familiar. Her laugh, her voice, the way she still tilted her head when she was trying not to smile. It felt like being 17 again, but safer, older, more serious. We talked about the years we had lost, the people we had been with, the mistakes we had made, the things we wanted now, and after a few months, we were together again. Mara was the first girl I ever loved. That mattered to me more than I wanted to admit. I had dated other women during the years apart. I had my own history. I was not innocent. I was not inexperienced. But when Mara told me about her life during those same years, something in me struggled. Not because she did anything wrong. She didn't. We were not together. She owed me nothing. I knew that logically. But emotionally, I kept catching myself comparing, wondering, imagining things I had no right to hold against her. I hated that about myself. I still do, because I had a past too. And somehow I wanted grace for mine while quietly struggling to offer the same to her. That is not fair. I know it is not fair. For the first few months after we got engaged, I kept all of that mostly inside. Then I got sick. Not a cold, not something temporary, a real diagnosis. The kind that changes how people look at you. The kind that turns normal life into appointments, test results, medication schedules, and people saying brave things because they do not know what else to say. Mara became incredibly devoted. She promised she would see me every day during treatment. At first, it felt beautiful. She brought food, sat with me after appointments, texted constantly, made sure I never felt alone. Everyone praised her for it. My parents called her an angel. Her mother said I was lucky. My friends said most men would dream of that kind of support. And I was grateful. I really was. But after a while, seeing her every single day stopped feeling like comfort. It became another thing I had to manage. If I was exhausted, I still had to be emotionally available. If I felt sick, I still had to reassure her. If I wanted one evening alone, it turned into a conversation about whether I was pulling away. Because of our families and culture, we do not live together yet, so every visit meant planning. Either I went to her parents' house and acted polite while I felt awful, or she came to mine and I had to put on a version of myself that made everyone less worried. There were days when I just wanted to lie in bed and not perform wellness for anyone, even for someone I loved. One night after a treatment day, Mara asked what time she should come over. I said, "Can we skip tonight?" She went quiet. Then she said, "You don't want to see me?" I said, "I'm tired." She said, "I know, that's why I want to be there." I said, "I need rest more than company right now." She sounded hurt. I could hear it immediately. She said, "I promised I would be there every day." I said, "I know, but I did not ask you to make that promise. That was the wrong thing to say." She started crying. Then I felt cruel. So I told her to come. And she did. And I spent the whole evening pretending I was happy she was there. She held my hand and watched a movie beside me. I stared at the screen and felt guilty for wanting silence. That pattern kept repeating. She wanted closeness. I wanted air. She heard distance. I meant survival. Then the backpacking trip happened. Mara had planned a 4-day hiking trip with a friend from her climbing group. His name was Adrian. I had heard about him before, but never met him properly. At first, I thought it was a group trip. Then, the night before they left, she casually mentioned it was just the two of them. No service. 4 days. 1 tent. Separate sleeping bags, she said. To save weight. I sat there for a second, waiting for her to explain why this had not come up earlier. She did not. So I asked, "You were going to share a tent with a single guy for 4 days and tell me the night before." She said, "That sounds worse than it is." I said, "It sounds exactly like what it is." She got defensive. She said Adrian was harmless. She said they had hiked together before. She said if I trusted her, this should not be a problem. I said, "Trust is not the same thing as being told at the last possible moment." She said she thought she had mentioned it. I said, "You mentioned a trip. You did not mention one guy, no service, one tent." She said, "You're making it sound inappropriate." I said, "I'm saying most people would want that information before the night before." The next morning, I met Adrian when he picked her up. He barely looked at me. Maybe he was shy. Maybe he was uncomfortable. Maybe I was already biased. But the whole thing felt wrong. After they left, I texted Mara before she lost service. I told her I was hurt. Not just worried. Hurt. Because we had check-ins. We talked about boundaries. We talked about being honest before things became problems. And still, this somehow slipped through. She replied that she was sorry. She said it had not occurred to her as a big deal until I reacted. Then she lost service. For 4 days. Those 4 days were miserable. I was sick, tired, unable to sleep properly, and stuck imagining every version of something I did not want to imagine. Then I hated myself for imagining it, because this was exactly the same insecurity I already hated. Her past, my fear, my need for control, all of it mixing together until I could not tell what was reasonable anymore. When she came back, she came straight to my house. She hugged me and said she missed me. I hugged her back. Then I asked, "Did anything happen?" She pulled away like I had insulted her. She said, "You seriously think I cheated?" I said, "No, I think I was left with 4 days of silence and too much information missing." She said, "I apologized." I said, "You apologized and then disappeared into the woods with him." She said, "So what was I supposed to do? Cancel everything because you were uncomfortable?" I said, "No. You were supposed to tell me early enough that we could actually talk about it." That became the fight. Not whether she cheated, not whether Adrian was safe. The fight was about whether my discomfort counted if she decided it should not. A week later, we argued again about seeing each other every day. I told her I needed some nights alone during treatment. She said, "I feel like I'm losing you." I said, "You're not losing me. I'm asking for space so I don't lose myself." She said, "That sounds like the same thing." I tried to explain. I told her that being sick had made every part of my life feel monitored. Doctors, parents, family, messages, questions, appointments, and now even love felt scheduled. She said she was only trying to help. I said. She cried again. Then she said something that stayed with me. She said, "I don't know how to love you less." I said, "I am not asking you to love me less." She said, "Then what are you asking?" I said, "I am asking you to trust that I still love you when I am not available every day." That was the closest we came to understanding each other, for about 5 minutes. Then she said, "And I'm asking you to understand that after everything, I need reassurance." I said, "I do understand that." She said, "Then why does giving it feel like a burden to you?" I did not have a clean answer, because sometimes it did feel like a burden, and admitting that made me feel horrible. Update 1. We are still engaged, but we paused wedding planning. Not dramatically, not as a punishment, just paused. We both agreed that planning a wedding while I am in treatment and while we are fighting about space is not smart. Update 2. Mara and I made a new agreement. She does not come every day unless I ask. Instead, we have planned days. And on my alone days, she sends one message in the morning and one at night. No checking if I am mad. No asking if I still love her. Just connection without pressure. It is helping. Update 3. The trip with Adrian is still a sore spot. She admits she should have told me earlier. I admit I let older insecurity make it worse in my head. Both things can be true. That is the uncomfortable part. I know some people will say I sound ungrateful. Maybe I do. Mara loves me deeply. She stood beside me when life got frightening. But deep love can still become suffocating if it does not listen. I do not want a relationship where care becomes control. And I do not want to punish her for a past that happened when we were not together. I am trying to be honest without being cruel. Trying to ask for space without making her feel unwanted. Trying to admit insecurity without turning it into an accusation. I love her. But I am learning that love does not erase boundaries. And if we are going to get married, she needs to understand that sometimes the healthiest version of me is the one she is willing to leave alone for a night.